Look at you talking that way in front of her. Don't you know she puts it all down in that?
Shelley Winters and Marilyn Monroe were not just two blondes trying to survive Hollywood. They were roommates, dreamers, secret keepers, and two women trapped inside images they did not fully control. Marilyn became the soft golden fantasy the world wanted to protect. Shelley became the loud, sharp, fearless actress Hollywood could never quite tame. But behind the glamour, their friendship carried tenderness, laughter, pain, and truths the cameras never caught.
How do we know they haven't decided to convert this place into an assembly line for automobiles or washing machines?
So when Marilyn died, many expected Shelley to be there for the final goodbye. But she was not. And that missing seat raised a question people still whisper about. Was it heartbreak, anger, guilt, or something far more personal? Join us as we uncover the bond, the damage, and the silence behind Shelley Winters' missing farewell. The Brooklyn girl who wanted more. Shelley Winters did not enter the world as Shelley Winters. She was born Shirley Shrift on August 18, 1920, in St. Louis, Missouri, into a Jewish family with roots in Austria-Hungary. Her mother, Rose, had once been a singer with the St. Louis Municipal Opera Theater, and her father, Jonas, designed men's clothing. There was music on one side of her home and hard work on the other. But the dream of becoming someone larger than life started early. In 1929, when Shelley was 9 years old, her family moved to Brooklyn, and that move changed the shape of her childhood. She grew up partly in Brooklyn and partly in Queens, learning quickly that life could be loud, rough, and unfair. Her father faced a painful legal trouble after his store burned, and Shelley later said that his store was destroyed, and so was her childhood. That kind of wound could have made her smaller. Instead, it made her push harder. She worked as a model, a store clerk, a chorus girl, and a vaudeville performer before she was even fully grown. She was not waiting for Hollywood to discover her. She was chasing it. Around 1933, when she was only 13, she marched into the world of George Cukor and David Selznick, dressed as if she could play Scarlett O'Hara in Gone with the Wind. She did not get the part, of course, but Cukor did something just as important. He took her seriously enough to tell her to study acting. Shelley later remembered that he made her feel like a real actress. For a girl from a tight family, a rough neighborhood, and a life full of hard turns, that was enough to light the match. And once Shelley had that match in her hand, Hollywood was about to learn she did not put fires out easily. The blonde Hollywood tried to put in a box. By the early 1940s, Shelley had started to turn that childhood fire into a career. She made her Broadway debut in The Night Before Christmas in 1941, then appeared in Rosalinda, which ran for hundreds of performances. Her big stage boost came when she joined Oklahoma as Ado Annie. It was not yet the kind of fame that made her name glow on movie posters, but it was enough to move her toward the film world. Columbia gave her a long-term contract, and she went to Los Angeles. At first, the parts were small. Sometimes they were so small that the audience would barely notice her. She appeared in films like There's Something About a Soldier, What a Woman, Sailor's Holiday, Dancing in Manhattan, Tonight and Every Night, and several more. She was working, but she was still being treated like a pretty extra who could be moved around the screen. Then came A Double Life in 1947. George Cukor gave Shelley a role that finally brought attention. The film made people look at her differently, but the studios still wanted to squeeze her into one easy box: blonde bombshell. That was the label. It looked flattering from the outside, but for Shelley it felt like a trap. She wanted respect, not just lighting. She wanted roles with weight, not just a face that men could admire. That hunger pushed her into acting classes and serious training. She studied with Charles Laughton, worked at the Actors Studio, and became one of those performers who believed acting should come from the deepest part of a person. And that is where her story begins to quietly connect with another young blonde trying to escape the same kind of box. At this stage, Shelley was already fighting to prove she had more inside her than Hollywood wanted to see. Soon, she would meet a woman who understood that fight in a softer, sadder way. The lonely girl behind Marilyn Monroe. Before Marilyn Monroe became the face on posters, the breathy voice in movie houses, and the woman the whole world thought it knew, she was Norma Jean Mortensen. She was born on June 1, 1926, in Los Angeles. Her start was not bright or protected. Her mother, Gladys, struggled with serious mental illness, and Marilyn spent much of her childhood moving through foster homes, relatives' homes, and an orphanage. She was not technically an orphan, but she often felt abandoned. That feeling followed her. As a young girl, movies became an escape. She once remembered not liking the grim world around her, and she found comfort sitting close to the screen, watching a bigger, prettier world glow above her. In 1942, when she was just 16, she was pushed into a marriage with James Dougherty, because the alternative was returning to the orphanage. It gave her safety for a time, but not happiness. She later said she was dying of boredom in that marriage. By 1944, while Dougherty was away during World War II, she worked at the radioplane factory. A photographer noticed her there, and a new path opened. In 1945, she began modeling, signed with the Blue Book Model Agency, straightened her curly brown hair, and dyed it blonde. By early 1946, she had appeared on dozens of magazine covers. Then Fox gave her a screen test, and she chose the name Marilyn Monroe. The first name came from a Broadway star, and Monroe was her mother's maiden name. The shy girl with the broken childhood was building a new self in public. But inside, she remained unsure, hungry, and afraid of being left behind. The name Marilyn Monroe gave her a fresh start, but it did not erase Norma Jean. And before the world turned her into a legend, one young actress saw her up close. Two blondes, one ruthless town. Shelley met the woman who would become Marilyn Monroe in the early 1940s, long before Marilyn became untouchable, and long before Shelley became the grand storyteller people later knew from talk shows. Shelley remembered Marilyn as sweet, whispery, and shy. At that time, Marilyn was connected to gossip columnist Sidney Skolsky, and even worked as his chauffeur. Shelley said Marilyn often wore a halter dress one size too small, and carried a large library book, like a dictionary or encyclopedia. That image says a lot. Marilyn was already learning how to be looked at, but she was also trying to learn. She wanted beauty and brains. She wanted attention and respect. Shelley saw both sides. Their friendship grew because they were living in the same strange world. Hollywood loved blondes, but it did not always listen to them. It could turn a woman into a fantasy while ignoring her mind. Shelley understood the insult of that. Marilyn lived it even more sharply. By the late 1940s, when Shelley was already gaining attention and Marilyn was still fighting for steady work, Shelley asked Marilyn to become her roommate. Marilyn's face, Shelley said, lit up. That reaction made Shelley feel ashamed that she had been so lost in her own trouble. The two women became close in that small, private way that famous people often lose once the world gets involved. They listened to classical records on Sunday mornings. They read about composers. They were, in Shelley's words, both hell-bent on culture. It is easy to make jokes about two blondes sharing an apartment in Hollywood. But behind the fun, there was something more human. They were trying to educate themselves. They were trying to become artists. They were trying to be more than the men around them expected. And that shared hunger tied them together before fame pulled everything apart. The secrets they shared behind closed doors. The roommate stories became some of the most famous parts of Shelley's memories of Marilyn. Some were funny, some were strange. Some were so bold that only Shelley could tell them with a straight face. She once said that she and Marilyn made lists of men they wanted to sleep with. Marilyn's choices surprised her. The names included Zero Mostel, Charles Laughton, Albert Einstein, and Arthur Miller, the man Marilyn would later marry. Shelley even claimed Marilyn had a thing for Einstein and may have slept with him. Whether every detail was exactly true almost does not matter, because Shelley herself warned readers about her memory. In her memoir, she cheekily wrote, "All the things I've written about are exactly as they happened." Then she added that some things were exactly as she wished they had happened. That was Shelley. She could tell a story like a confession and a performance at the same time. Still, her memories show the mood of those years. Marilyn was not just a helpless beauty waiting to be shaped. She was watching, learning, and choosing. Shelley claimed she coached Marilyn on how to look appealing to men by tilting her head back, lowering her eyes, and keeping her mouth partly open. Shelley sometimes remembered herself as a guide in Marilyn's early life, but her memories were not cold or cruel. She could praise Marilyn and tease her in the same breath. She joked that Marilyn's idea of making a salad was to scrub each leaf with a Brillo pad. But even in the teasing, there was affection. Shelley saw Marilyn's odd habits, her innocence, and her hidden cleverness. These were not two distant icons. They were young women sharing rooms, records, jokes, books, secrets, and the private fear that Hollywood might love their image more than their souls. And that fear would soon prove to be more than a feeling. Shelley learns the price of being seen. Shelley's fight against her own image reached a turning point with A Place in the Sun. In 1951, Hollywood still wanted the blonde beauty, but Shelley wanted the role of Alice Tripp, a plain factory girl whose life would not be sold through glamour. To win that role, she changed herself. She washed off the makeup, dyed her hair brown, bought dowdy clothes, and even studied how factory girls dressed. When director George Stevens arrived to meet her, he did not recognize her sitting in the corner. That was the point. Shelley had made herself disappear so her talent could be seen. The role brought her first Academy Award nomination and finally gave her the respect she craved. But the victory had a bitter edge. She did not like being made to look mousy beside Elizabeth Taylor, even if that ugliness helped the story. Shelley wanted to be taken seriously, but she still knew the pain of being stripped of beauty by someone else's hand. That mix of pride and hurt followed her through much of her career. She loved the stage most of all. She once said the best sound an actor could hear was the deep silence of an audience being hit where they live. That line tells us what Shelley wanted from acting. She did not just want applause, she wanted impact. She wanted the room to stop breathing. As her career grew, her romantic life became just as stormy. Her first marriage to Captain Mac Paul Mayer had begun in 1943 and ended in 1948 because he could not accept her Hollywood lifestyle and wanted a traditional wife. Shelley kept wearing his diamond ring long after the divorce, which shows how complicated her heart could be. She could be loud, free, and impossible to control. But she could also hold on to old tenderness in ways nobody expected. Marilyn, watching from nearby, was learning her own version of that same lesson. When Marilyn became too famous to own herself. While Shelley was fighting to be seen as more than a bombshell, Marilyn was becoming the bombshell of her generation. After early bit parts and failed contracts, her career began to move through modeling, small roles, and the help of powerful men. In 1950, Johnny Hyde helped her get noticed, and All About Eve and the Asphalt Jungle showed that even a few minutes of screen time could make people remember her. Then came a new Fox contract, fan letters, magazine covers, and the slow turn from hopeful actress to public obsession. In 1952, a nude calendar scandal could have destroyed her. Instead, Marilyn faced it by saying she had posed because she was broke and hungry. The public forgave her. In fact, they loved her more. She became the talk of Hollywood. But fame came with chains. Films like Monkey Business and We're Not Married kept pushing her as the sexy, childish blonde. She wanted roles that showed more than beauty. She studied acting, took classes, and tried to prove there was a real artist behind the famous image. In 1953, Niagara made her a powerful sex symbol. Gentlemen Prefer Blondes gave her the dumb blonde image that audiences adored. How to Marry a Millionaire made her even bigger. That same year, in 1953, Playboy used her earlier nude photos without her consent in its first issue, and her image traveled farther than her control ever could. She helped create the Marilyn the world wanted, but that same image began to swallow her. The public saw diamonds, dresses, and red lips. Shelley knew there was also the woman with the library book, and maybe that is why Shelley's memories of Marilyn feel so important. She had seen the person before the mask became too famous to remove. The lovers, the lies, and the lonely mirror. Both women lived in a Hollywood where romance could look glamorous in public and painful behind closed doors. Shelley married Vittorio Gassman in 1952, had her only child, Vittoria, in 1953, and divorced him in 1954. Later, she married Anthony Franciosa in 1957, and that marriage ended in 1960. Her life was full of love affairs, fights, and stories that sounded almost too wild to be real. In her memoirs, she wrote about famous men with a mix of pride, humor, and pain. She could be sharp, but she was rarely dull. Marilyn's love life moved under an even harsher spotlight. She married Joe DiMaggio in January 1954 after 2 years of dating. Their marriage lasted only 9 months. His jealousy and controlling ways made the union painful, and the famous 7-year itch subway grate scene helped push it toward the end. After that, in late 1954 and into 1955, Marilyn fought Fox for better roles and a better contract. She moved to New York, started Marilyn Monroe Productions with Milton Green, and took method acting seriously under Lee Strasberg. She was no longer satisfied with being treated like a studio fantasy. She wanted control, better roles, and real respect. Then came Arthur Miller. Marilyn admired his mind, his seriousness, and his world of books and ideas. They married in 1956, and she converted to Judaism. For a while she seemed happy. She entered his life, read deeply, wrote poems, and tried to build something safe. But safety never stayed long for Marilyn. In 1956, while making The Prince and The Showgirl in England, she found that Miller had written about being disappointed in her and embarrassed by her. For a woman already afraid of disappointing the people she loved, it was a deep cut. The public saw a movie star married to a great writer. Marilyn saw another mirror telling her she was not enough. The wounds Marilyn carried into every role. Marilyn's private writings later showed how much pain lived under the glow. Diaries, poems, letters, and notes revealed a woman trying to understand herself. She wrote about loneliness, fear, shame, and the old wounds of childhood. One notebook began with the words, Alone. I am alone. I am always alone, no matter what. That is not the voice of a spoiled star. It is the voice of someone who carried abandonment like a shadow. Her acting training with Lee Strasberg gave her hope, but it also pushed her into memories that hurt. She saw Strasberg almost like a father figure, and his approval mattered deeply. At the actor's studio, she could arrive quietly, with her hair hidden under a scarf, trying not to draw attention. But how could the most famous woman in the world disappear in a room full of actors? In one acting exercise, she recalled a painful memory so deeply that she began to sob. Another student remembered her being devastated by the end. Marilyn believed art could save her, but the work also opened wounds that never healed cleanly. She wrote of wanting Strasberg to cut her open like the best, finest surgeon, only for the dream to reveal sawdust inside, like a rag doll. That image is heartbreaking because it shows her fear of being empty, of having disappointed everyone who believed in her. Shelley, who also came from the method world, would have understood that kind of emotional work. Acting could make a performer powerful, but it could also pull old pain back into the room. The moment Marilyn proved she was no fool. One of Shelley's strongest memories of Marilyn came during filming in Canada in 1953. Marilyn was working on River of No Return with Robert Mitchum under director Otto Preminger. Shelley was nearby filming Saskatchewan. According to Shelley, she saw Preminger verbally attack Marilyn, while Marilyn took the abuse with a frozen smile. That image matters. It was not the silly blonde the studio sold. It was a working actress trapped under a director's temper, trying not to break in front of everyone. But Shelley also saw Marilyn's clever side. Marilyn claimed to have broken her ankle, which forced Preminger to treat her more kindly because the crew felt sympathy for her. Shelley admired the move. She wrote, "Dumb? Like a fox, was my young friend Marilyn." That night, they celebrated at a nightclub. Marilyn forgot for a moment that she was supposed to be injured and began dancing a little with Mitchum. Shelley told her to sit down because she was supposed to be crippled. Marilyn giggled, remembered the act, and sat on Mitchum's lap. It is a small story, but it says so much. Marilyn could be wounded and strategic at the same time. She could look helpless while quietly protecting herself. Shelley understood that kind of survival, even if her own style was louder. That is why their friendship was never just about glamour. It was about survival. They were two women trying to work inside a system that smiled at them while cutting them down. And by the late 1950s, the cuts were getting deeper for both of them, though Marilyn's were beginning to show in more frightening ways. The actress trapped inside the fantasy. Marilyn did win some of the respect she wanted. Bus Stop in 1956 helped critics see her differently. One review said her performance helped destroy the idea that she was only a glamour personality. Some Like It Hot in 1959 became one of her greatest successes, and she won a Golden Globe for it. Yet even that triumph came through chaos. On set, she was late, anxious, unsure, and often needed many takes. Directors and co-stars grew frustrated, but her performances still worked. Billy Wilder admitted that anyone could remember lines, but it took a real artist to give the performance she gave. This was the strange Marilyn problem. People complained about how she worked, then praised what she created. Her body was tired. Her sleep was broken. Her dependence on pills grew worse. Her marriage to Miller was failing. And in 1960, the Misfits turned that pain into a movie. Miller wrote the role of Rosalind partly from Marilyn herself, and that hurt her. During filming in the Nevada desert, she was ill, addicted, and emotionally battered. Her makeup sometimes had to be applied, while she was still under the effect of barbiturates. Still, director John Huston said that when Marilyn acted, she was not pretending. She went deep inside herself and brought the feeling up. That may be the most painful compliment of all. Marilyn's gift came from the same place as her suffering. In January 1961, after The Misfits, her marriage to Miller ended. The film was released the following month, in February 1961, and failed at the box office at the time, though later many people looked at it with more respect. Marilyn kept trying to move forward, but the road was narrowing, and while Shelley kept building a tough, restless, outspoken career, Marilyn was becoming a woman surrounded by helpers, doctors, studios, and men who often seemed unable to truly help her. The survivor Hollywood could not break. By the early 1960s, Shelley Winters was no longer fighting to prove she had talent. She had already done that. Now, Hollywood had to deal with her as a serious actress. In 1960, she won the Academy Award for The Diary of Anne Frank, then donated the Oscar statuette to the Anne Frank House in Amsterdam. That gesture showed the serious side of Shelley, the side that cared about history, causes, and meaning. She was soon in demand as a character actor, taking roles in Odds Against Tomorrow, Let No Man Write My Epitaph, The Young Savages, and Lolita. By 1962, when Lolita was released, her performance as Charlotte Hayes drew strong attention. She returned to stage work too, including The Night of the Iguana in 1962 and other plays. Shelley had a stormy public personality, but she also had a real political heart. She was a Democrat, attended the 1960 Democratic National Convention, supported civil rights, and in 1965 spoke to marchers outside Montgomery, Alabama. Eleanor Roosevelt once told her, "You're what we call an emotional Democrat. You're a little weak on facts, but your heart is in the right place." That line fits Shelley almost perfectly. Her heart usually arrived before her filter. She could be loyal, brave, funny, and impossible. She could also be combative. In 1975, she famously poured water over Oliver Reed after an anti-feminist remark on The Tonight Show. Shelley kept moving, even when life got messy. While she was becoming a stronger character actress, Marilyn was facing the hardest private fight of her life. Marilyn's last fight with Hollywood. In 1961, Marilyn focused on her health, but even that became another struggle. She had surgery for endometriosis and gallbladder problems, and she also entered hospital care for depression. In February 1961, one stay became a nightmare. She admitted herself to Payne Whitney, expecting rest, but was placed in a locked psychiatric ward. She later wrote to Dr. Ralph Greenson that there was no empathy there and that it felt like prison. She said the doors had windows so patients could be seen all the time, and everything was under lock and key. Feeling trapped, she used an idea from her film Don't Bother to Knock. She broke glass and told the staff that if they treated her like a nut, she would act like one. Joe DiMaggio helped get her out. That detail matters because, even after their painful marriage, he remained one of the few people who could step in when the system closed around her. In 1962, Marilyn bought her Brentwood home and tried to return to work with Something's Got to Give, directed by George Cukor. She looked radiant in the famous pool footage, but behind the scenes, she was sick with sinusitis and often absent. Fox accused her publicly of faking, then fired her on June 7th and sued her. The studio soon regretted it and reopened talks, but the damage was done. During her final months, she lived at 12305 5th Helena Drive. Late on August 4, 1962, Marilyn died at home. In the early hours of August 5th, her housekeeper sensed something was wrong. A light was under Marilyn's bedroom door, but there was no answer. Dr. Greenson came, entered through a window, and found Marilyn dead in bed, covered by a sheet with her hand around a telephone receiver. Officials later said she died from acute barbiturate poisoning and classified it as a probable suicide. But the public did not let the story rest. Newspapers filled with her face. People called for details. Jean Cocteau said her death should be a lesson to those who spy on and torment film stars. Laurence Olivier called her the complete victim of ballyhoo and sensation. Joshua Logan called her one of the most unappreciated people in the world. For Shelley, though, this was not only a headline. This was Norma Jean, the shy roommate with the books. The missing seat at Marilyn's funeral. Marilyn's funeral was held on August 8, 1962, at Westwood Village Memorial Park Cemetery. It was private, and that privacy mattered. Joe DiMaggio helped arrange the service with Inez Melson and others close to Marilyn. He was the only one of her former husbands who attended. He also barred most of Hollywood from the funeral. Studio people, famous names, the press, and the glittering crowd that usually rushed toward tragedy were kept away. DiMaggio believed many of those people had helped make Marilyn unhappy, so the funeral was not allowed to become another Hollywood show. Only a small group attended, while hundreds of spectators crowded the streets outside. That is where the question around Shelley Winters begins to grow. Shelley had been Marilyn's close friend. She had laughed with her, watched her study, shared private jokes, and seen how cruel the industry could be to her. Yet Shelley was not there. Many others were missing too, including Arthur Miller. But Shelley's absence feels different because her memories of Marilyn were so vivid and so personal. She later spoke of Marilyn with affection and called her brilliant and misunderstood. She described her as clever, wounded, funny, and far more aware than people believed. So Shelley's absence cannot be treated like a simple snub. It feels heavier than that. Maybe it was grief. Maybe it was anger. Maybe it was the pain of watching Marilyn become one more Hollywood tragedy in front of cameras and strangers. Shelley was not just another name missing from the guest list. She had known Marilyn before the world turned her into a dream. She had seen the shy girl behind the famous face. So, when that small private service went on without her, the silence felt almost louder than anything Shelley could have said. Do you think Shelley stayed away because the funeral was kept private? Or because saying goodbye to Marilyn in public was just too painful? And do you think Marilyn was more hurt by fame or by the people around her? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more incredible stories from Hollywood's fascinating history. See you next time.